Our mission today is we are cutting through all the fad diets and extreme workout routines to look at a genuinely sustainable framework for change.
Yeah, it's titled Kaizen, the Japanese Method for Transforming Habits by an author named Sarah. And the hook here, the core promise of this material, completely reframes how we view our own personal failures.
Yeah, it really does.
It poses this question: what if the reason you fail at your goals isn't a lack of willpower, but rather that your brain is actively treating your ambition as a literal physical threat?
I mean, that changes everything. And I actually want to start with the author's own breaking point because it sets up the exact environment where this philosophy really thrives.
Right, the London story.
Yes. So Sarah, the author, was living in London. She was working in publishing, dealing with chronic burnout, and frantically trying to fix it with, the usual arsenal.
Like yoga classes and mindfulness apps?
Exactly. But none of it was piercing the anxiety. So she decides she needs a radical environmental shift, packs up everything, and moves to Tokyo.
Which, on the surface, initially seems super counterintuitive. I mean,
Yeah.
if you are trying to escape a frantic, high-pressure urban environment, moving to one of the most densely populated, high-energy metropolitan areas on the planet just seems like a misstep.
I thought the exact same thing. And she specifically notes that visually, the Tokyo Metro at rush hour is just as packed as the London Underground. Like you have people pressed against the glass.
Yeah, but the vibe is completely different.
Completely. The auditory and psychological contrast is what caught her attention. In London, there was this ambient passive-aggressive friction. A lot of sighing, shoving people on frantic autopilot. But in Tokyo, despite that overwhelming physical density, she observed a profound silence and an undeniable order. Like the traffic was deeply congested, but the aggressive horn honking was absent.
And so she started looking underneath that general sense of calm, right, to see the societal mechanics that were actually powering it.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly did she find?
Well, what she found was a cultural infrastructure built entirely around meticulous incremental work. It's a societal operating system that values extreme, slow mastery over rapid, chaotic output.
The examples she pulls from the text are striking. I mean, you have sushi chefs who spend 7 full years just mastering the preparation of the rice.
Wow.
Yeah, 7 years on the rice and the cutting techniques before they are even considered competent. And you look at the education system, right? Japanese students take their entire compulsory schooling to master the full set of 2,136 kanji characters.
It's a very slow drip.
Exactly. She even mentions watching a road repair crew. Instead of shutting down a street for months with heavy machinery, this massive team arrives. Each person executes one incredibly specific, microscopic task, and the road is perfectly resurfaced in a matter of days.
Yeah, and the philosophy driving this approach is called Kaizen, which translates roughly to good change or continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement, right?
Although I will say the translation doesn't quite capture the application. Kaizen isn't about making change just for the sake of novelty.
What do you mean?
It's a highly structured framework. You identify a destination, and then you engineer the absolute smallest, most manageable steps to get there. It actively avoids the allure of the big, sweeping overhaul.
Which is so interesting, because when you look at the focus on traditional Japanese craftsmanship, it is incredibly easy to assume Kaizen is this ancient Eastern philosophy.
Right, like something passed down by Zen monks through antiquity.
Exactly. But the history presented in the source completely subverts that assumption.
Oh, yeah. What's fascinating here is that the origin story is this massive historical twist. Kaizen actually began in the United States.
Wait, really?
Yeah, specifically during the Second World War. The U.S. government realized that with, a significant portion of the male workforce deployed overseas, domestic factories were severely struggling to keep up with wartime production demands.
Because they needed to innovate rapidly, but lacked the experienced personnel.
Right. So they established a government program called Training Within Industries, or TWI.
And the brilliance of TWI was that it completely abandoned the traditional top-down management style, right?
Exactly. Instead of executives barking these massive systemic changes down to the floor workers, they literally asked the floor workers to analyze their own daily repetitive motions.
Just to suggest tiny incremental adjustments, like how to save a few seconds or a few inches of movement.
Yeah. But post-war, American businesses felt flush with victory and largely abandoned the TWI framework. They just reverted to top-down management.
But Japan did the opposite.
Right. Across the Pacific, Japan's industrial infrastructure was economically decimated. So the U.S., motivated to rebuild Japan's economy to serve as a strategic buffer in the region, sent over management advisors.
And that team was led by an American named William Edwards Deming.
Yes, and Deming brought those TWI continuous improvement techniques right over with him.
And Japanese businesses adopted this framework aggressively. I mean, Toyota is a textbook example here. They institutionalized it, they christened it Kaizen, and they used it to relentlessly eliminate muda.
Which was their term for waste on the manufacturing line.
Right. They empowered everyone, from the lead engineers all the way down to the janitorial staff, to suggest microscopic efficiency tweaks.
And the compounding effect of those tweaks literally fueled the massive Japanese economic miracle of the late 20th century.
It's wild. And then by the 1980s, Western companies were losing significant market share to Japanese manufacturers.
Yeah.
They couldn't understand how they were being outpaced.
Yeah, so an organizational theorist named Masaki Imai ended up re-exporting Kaizen back to the West as a formal management theory.
And the reason this East meets West migration matters for us, and for you listening, is that it proves Kaizen is not bound to a specific cultural temperament.
Absolutely not.
It was engineered in American factories, refined in Japanese automotive plants, and is now utilized globally. It's a universal human operating system.
Because it interfaces perfectly with our neurology.
Right, but why? Like, why does our operating system actually need this slow, incremental approach?
Well, to understand that, we really have to look at the severe biological resistance we have to change, the psychology of habits.
Which the source dives into heavily.
It does. It references Ben Gardner, a psychologist from King's College London, who classifies humans as cognitive misers.
Cognitive misers. That phrase implies our brains are actively hoarding resources.
That is essentially exactly what is happening. The human brain makes up about 2% of our total body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of our daily energy intake. Yeah, it's an incredibly expensive organ to run. So to prevent us from constantly depleting our glucose levels just by navigating daily life, the brain looks for any repeated behavior and locks it in as an automated routine.
Okay, so when I make coffee in the morning, I am not consciously calculating the physics of pouring water or, like, the exact grip strength needed for the mug.
Right. Your brain has automated the entire mechanical sequence.
So I can use my prefrontal cortex to, stress about an upcoming meeting.
Exactly that. It is a brilliant survival mechanism for energy conservation. The flaw in the system, though, is that the brain is entirely amoral when it comes to automation.
Meaning it doesn't judge the habit.
Right. It does not distinguish between a behavior that improves your health and a behavior that destroys it. It only cares about the neurochemical reward.
So if you experience intense stress at work, and you come home and use a bad habit to cope, your brain just registers the relief.
Exactly. Repeat that loop a few times, and the brain permanently wires stress as the automated cue for that bad habit.
And breaking that automated loop is notoriously difficult. But okay, let me push back on this a little, because the self-improvement industry constantly peddles this idea that it takes exactly 21 days to form a new habit or break an old one.
Oh, the 21-day rule.
Yeah, right. Like you just have to white-knuckle your way through 3 weeks of misery, and then your biology magically complies. Is that true?
No. The source material systematically dismantles the 21-day timeline. It cites a comprehensive study conducted by psychologists at University College London.
What did they find?
They tracked participants trying to form new health behaviors and measured how long it took them to reach automaticity.
Which is the point where the behavior occurs without conscious effort.
Right, and the data showed that the 21-day metric is a complete myth. Reaching actual neurological automaticity takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days.
254 days?
Yeah, depending on the complexity of the task and the individual.
See, a 254-day commitment requires an entirely different psychological strategy than a 3-week sprint.
Absolutely.
And this brings us back to the house alarm metaphor we opened with. The reason we struggle to sustain those new behaviors for 254 days is because of a very specific cluster of nuclei in the brain called the amygdala.
Right. The amygdala functions as our primary threat detection center.
Our inner alarm.
Exactly. Evolutionarily, we survived because we possessed a deep negativity bias. If an early human heard a rustle in the grass, the ones who assumed it was a predator survived. The ones who assumed it was just the wind did not.
So our brains are hardwired to view any sudden drastic shift in our environment or routine as a potential threat to our survival.
Exactly. So when you decide to completely reinvent your life on a Monday morning, You declare you're going to cut out all sugar, wake up 2 hours earlier, and run 5 miles.
Your rational prefrontal cortex believes it is being productive.
But the amygdala observes this massive, abrupt destruction of the established daily routine and triggers the fight-or-flight response.
It sounds the alarm.
Yes. It floods the nervous system with cortisol and adrenaline. It awakens your inner critic and generates intense feelings of anxiety and fatigue.
That makes so much sense. This is the biological mechanism behind why so many ambitious resolutions collapse within a fortnight.
Exactly. You have not failed due to a lack of moral fortitude. You've just inadvertently triggered your own biological defense system.
Which is kind of relieving to hear, honestly. And the source introduces this metaphor from clinical psychologist Robert Moore to explain how Kaizen circumvents this biological defense, and it is brilliant.
The cat burglar metaphor.
Yes. If your amygdala is a hypersensitive house alarm, Kaizen is a cat burglar.
And a cat burglar operates entirely on stealth.
Precisely. A cat burglar doesn't kick the front door down. They pick the lock so slowly and step so softly that the sensors simply do not register the intrusion.
I love that visual.
Right. By making a change to your routine that is microscopically small, you bypass the amygdala's threshold for threat detection. The alarm never sounds.
But the cat burglar isn't just sneaking through.
No, they are quietly rewiring the house's electrical grid while they are inside. You are carving new neural pathways and establishing automaticity completely under the radar.
Because the disruption is statistically insignificant, the brain permits it. And over time, those insignificant changes begin to physically alter the architecture of your habits.
See, I understand the neurology of tiptoeing past the alarm, but this is where I struggle a bit with the practical application.
How so?
Mathematically, if I only change my behavior by 1%, I feel like I am going to be in the exact same place a year from now. A 1% tweak sounds like a rounding error, not a catalyst for actual transformation.
You would assume that, yeah. But here's where it gets really interesting. The mathematics of compounding interest dictate otherwise.
Okay, lay it on me.
The source provides the definitive case study for this, and it moves out of manufacturing and into professional sports. Have you heard of Sir Dave Brailsford?
Vaguely, yeah. In relation to the Olympics, maybe?
Yeah. In 2002, Dave Brailsford took over as the performance director for British cycling. And prior to his arrival, the team's historical record was pretty abysmal.
They weren't exactly a powerhouse.
No, they were essentially a non-entity on the world stage. But Brailsford possessed a background in business management and decided to apply the principles of Kaizen.
Which in sports science is referred to as the theory of marginal gains, right?
Exactly. His thesis was simple. Stop searching for a dramatic physiological breakthrough. Instead, deconstruct the act of riding a bicycle into every conceivable component and improve each individual component by exactly 1%.
So they are looking at elements that seem entirely disconnected from pedaling a bike.
They analyzed everything. They tested the aerodynamics of different fabric and wind tunnels to gain a 1% reduction in drag.
Okay.
They rubbed alcohol on the tires to get a 1% better grip on the track. They brought their own mattresses and pillows to hotels to guarantee a 1% improvement in sleep quality.
That's dedication.
They even hired a surgeon to teach the athletes the optimal way to wash their hands.
Wait, hand washing. How does that win a bike race?
Because it reduces the probability of catching a minor cold by 1%.
Oh, wow. Okay, but still, none of those individual actions make a cyclist demonstrably faster on their own. Hand washing does not win a gold medal.
Individually, no. But marginal gains do not operate on simple addition. They operate on multiplication.
The compounding effect.
Right. When you stack hundreds of 1% improvements on top of each other, the compounding result is exponential. 6 years after Brailsford implemented this Kaizen approach, the British cycling team arrived at the 2008 Beijing Olympics.
And what happened?
They won 7 out of the 10 available gold medals.
That's incredible.
And then 4 years later, at the London Olympics, they repeated that exact same dominance.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture for you listening, the translation is that you should treat your life like the British cycling team. You don't need a 100% overhaul today.
Right, you just need a 1% tweak.
We are constantly looking for the sweeping overhaul to fix our lives, when the math clearly shows that relentlessly stacking microscopic tweaks yields superior results.
It really does.
So I want to actively apply this 1% rule to the modern daily stressors most of us are fighting right now. For instance, the sheer volume of time we spend staring at our phones.
Technology addiction is an excellent testing ground for Kaizen.
How so?
Well, the source dissects the behavioral psychology behind our digital habits, specifically noting that social media platforms and email interfaces are engineered using what is called a variable interval reinforcement schedule.
That is a very academic way of describing the mechanics of a casino.
It is the exact same dopamine foraging mechanism utilized by slot machines in Vegas.
It's just pull the lever.
Exactly. B.F. Skinner demonstrated this decades ago with rats. If an animal presses a lever and gets food every single time, they only press it when they are hungry. But if they press the lever and the reward is completely unpredictable, sometimes nothing, sometimes a massive payout, their dopamine levels actually spike in anticipation of the reward.
So they just pull the lever obsessively hoping for a hit.
Yes. Dopamine is the chemical of seeking, not just the reward itself.
So every time we pull down to refresh an app, we are pulling the slot machine lever. We are foraging for that unpredictable hit of social validation or urgent news.
Yeah. And the standard cultural advice to combat this is, of course, the dramatic overhaul.
The weekend digital detox?
Right. We are told to delete all our apps or leave our phones in another room. But based on the neurology we just discussed, severing that dopamine supply abruptly is going to trigger the amygdala immediately.
The brain will initiate a panic response because of this sudden withdrawal.
Exactly. So the Kaizen approach rejects the digital detox entirely.
So you don't throw the phone in the ocean.
No. Instead, you introduce a 1% friction point. You leave the apps on your phone, but you turn off the push notifications for just one day.
That's very doable.
Or you simply move the social media icons off your home screen and bury them inside a folder on the third page of your device.
Oh, I like that. You are not denying yourself access, so the amygdala stays quiet, the alarm doesn't go off.
Right, but you are forcing the brain to execute an extra physical swipe, which disrupts the automaticity.
It forces a half-second of conscious awareness before you pull the lever.
Exactly.
And navigating that constant low-level resistance to our phones throughout the day creates severe decision fatigue, which actually directly bleeds over into another major stressor the source tackles, money stress, financial impulsivity.
Oh, definitely. Decision fatigue aggressively depletes our executive function.
So by the end of the day, when your prefrontal cortex is exhausted,
Yeah.
you are far more likely to just tap that credit card to secure a quick dopamine hit.
Right. And to address this, the text introduces a Japanese framework called
Kakeibo, which translates to a household financial ledger, correct?
Yes, it was developed way back in 1904 by Hani Motoko.
Who was Japan's first female journalist, right?
She was. And much like the digital detox, the standard advice for financial anxiety is usually extreme deprivation. Cut up the credit cards, stop eating out, live on absolute necessities.
Which again, triggers the amygdala, creates a profound sense of scarcity, and inevitably leads to a massive binge purchase a week later.
Exactly. Kakeibo sidesteps the scarcity trigger. It does not mandate that you stop spending entirely.
What does it do?
It simply targets the automaticity of the transaction. It requires you to mindfully track your outgoings in a ledger, categorize them, and reflect on the purchase.
So the Kaizen approach here is just pure awareness to break that automatic tap of the card.
Right.
And the source offers a brilliantly simple, modern adaptation of this. You literally just wrap a sticky note around your credit card that asks, do I actually need this?
I love that trick.
It's so good because it doesn't physically prevent you from buying the coffee. It just acts as a speed bump, forcing you to transition from the automated brain back to the conscious brain for 1 second. So what does this all mean? I mean, this raises a crucial practical question. We can implement all the sticky notes and app folders we want, but life gets in the way. What happens when you inevitably fall off the wagon?
Well, systematic backsliding is an absolute certainty.
Right, you get sick or work demands 14 hours of your day, and you just cannot execute your new habits.
Exactly. But the Kaizen framework accounts for this volatility with a safety net called the never zero rule.
The never zero rule.
Yes. When your environment becomes chaotic and your motivation is entirely depleted, you do not abandon the target behavior. You mathematically reduce it to its absolute minimum viable expression.
Just to maintain the psychological chain of consistency.
Right. So if your goal is a 45-minute gym session and you are running on 3 hours of sleep, the instinct is to scrap the workout entirely because you can't meet the standard.
But under the never zero rule,
You drop down to the floor and you execute exactly one push-up.
one push-up.
Or if your goal is to write a chapter of a novel and you are cognitively fried, you open the document and you type one single sentence.
Wow. So by doing one push-up, you are communicating to your brain that the identity of the habit is still intact. but the execution barrier is so incredibly low that the cat burglar slips right past the exhaustion and the alarm.
Exactly. And maintaining that unbroken chain leads directly to the ultimate objective of the Kaizen philosophy, a concept known as yokoten.
Yokoten.
Yes, which translates to the horizontal deployment of success.
Horizontal deployment.
Right. It is the realization that a minor neurological victory in one isolated area of your life does not remain contained. It bleeds into the adjacent areas.
This is an infectious cycle of good change.
Absolutely. If you prove to yourself that you can reliably execute one push-up every day or systematically track one financial purchase, you generate a microscopic amount of self-trust.
And that trust compounds. The confidence forged by simply organizing your morning routine begins to horizontally deploy into how you manage a difficult conversation at work.
Or how you regulate your emotional responses. It creates a cascading architecture of competent behavior.
It essentially restores your locus of control. You recognize that you have immense agency over your reality, just not through the violent, sweeping overhauls you were culturally conditioned to expect.
Exactly.
Well, to wrap up this deep dive, the mechanics we've unpacked today offer a profound shift in perspective. True transformation doesn't come from scary, exhausting leaps into the dark.
No, it doesn't.
It comes from respecting your brain's biology and making changes so incredibly small that you simply can't fail.
And it requires a fundamental baseline of self-compassion. The source captures this beautifully with the Japanese proverb, "The bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists."
That's a great proverb.
Yeah, Kaizen is the practice of being the bamboo. It favors flexibility, patience, and incremental adaptation over that rigid, brittle perfectionism that snaps under pressure.
I love that. And to leave you, the learner, with a final lingering thought to mull over today, we're conditioned to believe that if we aren't achieving our goals, it's because we aren't dreaming big enough. But what if the exact opposite is true? What if the biggest barrier to your ultimate success isn't a lack of willpower, but the fact that your daily goals are simply too big?